Here are 50 different philosophies. Existentialism. Existentialism invites us to consider what it truly means to be, not just to breathe, but to choose, to become, and to face the full weight of freedom. It begins in silence, not in books or doctrines, but in that quiet moment of awareness when we realize we are here and we must decide what to do with it. Existentialism doesn't hand you a manual. It doesn't say what's right or wrong, true or false. Instead, it whispers, "What do you believe?" when no one tells you what to believe. Thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, and Albert Camus stood in the aftermath of war, disillusionment, and chaos. They looked at a world without clear answers and still insisted on living honestly within it. Sartre said, "We are condemned to be free." This is not a punishment, but a truth. There is no cosmic script, no fixed role. You are not born with a purpose. You are born, and then you must write your own. That is your burden. That is your gift. Camus spoke of the absurd, the tension between our desire for meaning and a universe that remains silent. He imagined Sisyphus endlessly pushing a boulder uphill, and he asked us to imagine him happy, not because life made sense, but because he chose to give it meaning. Existentialism embraces this paradox. We are alone, yet responsible. We are uncertain, yet free. We are fragile, yet capable of immense courage. So lie back, or let these thoughts drift softly into the night. You are not a static thing. You are not a label. You are a becoming. And no one, not even the stars, can define you but you. Absurdism. Absurdism invites us to consider the quiet conflict between our longing for meaning and the silence of the universe. We are born reaching for purpose, for answers, for something permanent to hold. And yet, when we look outward to the stars, to reason, to gods or systems, the response is stillness. This is the absurd. The tension between the human need for meaning and the unreasoning world that offers none. Albert Camus, the voice most deeply associated with absurdism, did not try to resolve this tension. He did not say, "You will find meaning." Instead, he asked, "What will you do, knowing there may be none?" For Camus, life is a paradox. We build sandcastles knowing the tide will wash them away. We search for clarity in a world without promises, but this is not hopelessness, not nihilism. Camus tells us to imagine Sisyphus not as a victim, but as a rebel, smiling, choosing, pushing his stone, not because he must, but because he says yes to life in spite of it all. Absurdism is about that yes, the choice to live fully in a world that does not offer reasons, to love without guarantees, to create without reward, to exist, not for something, but anyway. So lie back, feel your breath rise and fall like waves on an indifferent sea, and yet you are here, alive, a witness, a question that has no final answer. And that, says absurdism, is enough. Humanism. Humanism invites us to consider the dignity and potential of the human being, not in some perfect divine form, but in the ordinary person, thinking, feeling, and striving in a shared world. It says, we do not need to look above for worth. We need only look within and across to one another. Humanism believes in reason, in compassion, in progress born not of miracles, but of human effort, empathy, and learning. It emerged as a quiet revolution, a whisper during the Renaissance, a refusal during the Enlightenment, a resistance against cruelty, ignorance, and despair. It says, we are capable of building meaning, of solving problems, of choosing peace, of standing for justice. not because we are commanded, but because we care. There is no one book, no single prophet. Humanism is not bound to a single culture or time. It is the shared light of human hearts trying to live well together. It does not deny suffering. It does not pretend we are flawless. But it holds that we are enough, not as we are in myth, but as we are in truth. So breathe in now. Feel the warmth of that idea, that being human is not a curse to overcome, but a gift to explore. You are not a mistake. You are a moment of thought, life, and care in a vast and difficult world. And that is something beautiful. Pragmatism. Pragmatism invites us to consider truth not as something fixed in the sky, but as something living, unfolding, tested by time, by results, by experience. It is a philosophy of action, of usefulness, of the question, does it work? Does it help us live better lives? Pragmatism began in America, where thinkers like William James, John Dewey, and Charles Sanders Peirce walked not through marble halls of idealism, but through classrooms, courtrooms, and the messy heart of democracy. They believed that truth was not something we find once and guard forever. It is something we create, revise, and live through. To the pragmatist, beliefs are tools, not treasures. Ideas must earn their keep. If a belief leads to hope, cooperation, insight, or healing, it has value. If it fails us, it can be left behind. There are no eternal answers, only evolving questions. And this, too, is wisdom. Pragmatism reminds us that life is not lived in theory, it is lived in motion, in decisions, relationships, responsibilities, in the balance between what is and what could be. So tonight, rest your thoughts on this soft foundation. You do not need to solve everything in the abstract. You only need to ask, what works? What helps me grow? What helps us live together more humanely? Sometimes truth is not an ideal, but a path worn into the ground by those who have walked it kindly, again and again. Phenomenology. Phenomenology invites us to consider not just what we know, but how we experience. It begins not with facts, but with awareness, with the raw moment before explanation, before we label, before we judge, before we interpret. What is it like to see, to feel, to be? This is where phenomenology lives, in the texture of being. Founded by Edmund Husserl and later shaped by minds like Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, and Edith Stein, phenomenology turns philosophy inward. It does not look to prove or disprove, but to describe, to pause, to witness. It says, set aside your assumptions, bracket what you think you know, and simply observe. The sound of rain, the shape of fear, the color of memory. Phenomenology invites us to slow down, to notice the way the world appears through our conscious lens, and to understand that even perception is an act of being. Heidegger took this further. He asked not just how we experience, but what it means to be at all, to exist in time, to dwell, to be a presence that knows it will one day become absence. There is beauty here, a strange calm in becoming the witness to your own experience. So as you rest, you may let go of needing to analyze. Instead, just notice the rhythm of your breath, the space you occupy, the feeling of existing here and now. Before thought, before concept, there is experience. And that is the beginning of knowing. Stoicism. Stoicism invites us to consider what we can control and what we must learn to release. Born in the ancient marketplaces of Greece and shaped in the hearts of Roman emperors and exiled philosophers, Stoicism teaches a calm and resilient way of being. Its core wisdom is simple. we suffer not from things themselves, but from our judgments about them. The Stoics, Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, spoke not in riddles, but in reminders. That life will change, that loss is certain, that the world is not ours to command, only ourselves. They taught that virtue, courage, temperance, wisdom, and justice is the only true good, and that everything else, fame, fortune, health, even death, is indifferent. This doesn't mean you must be cold, only clear, to feel pain without becoming it, to meet difficulty without surrendering your peace, to act with purpose even when the world turns dark. Marcus Aurelius, writing quietly to himself at the end of each day, said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. So lie back now. Whatever the day brought, it is passing. Whatever storm arrived, it too will leave. You are not your fear. You are not your success. You are the captain of your inner world. And tonight your ship can rest." Epicureanism. Epicureanism invites us to consider that happiness, true happiness, begins in simplicity, not in luxury, not in excess, but in the gentle rhythm of a peaceful life. Founded by the philosopher Epicurus over 2,300 years ago, this school of thought is often misunderstood. It is not a call to indulgence, but to inner ease. Epicurus taught that pleasure is the goal of life, but not fleeting pleasure, not the pleasure of noise and grasping and consumption. Instead, the quiet joy of friendship, of freedom from fear, of living without pain in body or mind. He asked, what do we really need? A bit of food, a roof overhead, a friend by our side, a mind untroubled by fear of gods or death. He believed death was nothing to fear, for when we are, it is not, and when it is, we are not. Epicureanism is not about denying life, but embracing it gently, saying, I am here, I have enough. Let me be grateful and unafraid. So tonight, let go of all that is not necessary. Let the noise of the world fall away. You do not need more. You are not behind. You are not late to anything. You are alive. And for now, that is enough. Let peace settle in your chest like warm sun through an open window, and sleep simply softly in the Epicurean light. Cynicism. Cynicism invites us to consider what life might feel like if we let go of every false need. Not just the clutter in our homes, but the clutter in our hearts, status, wealth, approval, routine, pretense. The Cynics, ancient Greek philosophers like Diogenes, lived as if they needed nothing but air, bread, and the truth. Diogenes carried a lantern through the streets, saying he was looking for an honest man. He slept in a barrel. He mocked power. He rejected every social mask. But behind his provocation was a deep question. Why do we chase what does not nourish us? Cynicism is not about bitterness. It is about freedom. Freedom from illusion. Freedom from vanity. Freedom from becoming a copy of someone else's dream. The cynic strips away everything that isn't essential and finds underneath it all a human being, awake, clear, and whole. You do not need to live in a barrel, but you might ask, what am I holding on to that no longer serves me? What hunger is mine, and what hunger was sold to me? As you lie here now, release the unnecessary. You do not need to impress. You do not need to pretend. You only need to return to what is real and quiet in yours. Like the cynic's bare feet on warm stone, you are enough exactly as you are. Skepticism. Skepticism invites us to consider what it means to not know and to be at peace with that. It does not demand that we believe nothing, but that we hold our beliefs gently. That we question not only the world, but the way we come to understand it. Ancient skeptics like Pyrrho and Sextus Empiricus believed that certainty was the root of disturbance, that dogma, whether religious, political, or personal, tightens the mind and closes the heart. They practiced epoche, the suspension of judgment, letting thoughts pass like clouds without needing to claim them as truth. And in that suspension came calm. The skeptics were not afraid of mystery. They embraced it. They said, perhaps, maybe, I don't know, and that's okay. In a world full of noise, this kind of stillness is radical. It doesn't mean giving up thought, but releasing the need for final answers. You don't have to figure everything out tonight. You don't have to solve yourself, the world, or the future. Skepticism gives us permission to rest inside the question. So breathe. Let go of conclusions. Let go of urgency. Let yourself be here, aware, uncertain, and unafraid. Peace, the skeptic said, is not found in knowledge, but in quieting the craving for it. Neoplatonism. Neoplatonism invites us to consider that beneath the changing surface of things, beyond form, beyond name, there is one, a unity, a stillness, a source from which all being flows. Rooted in the teachings of Plato and developed by the mystic philosopher Plotinus, Neoplatonism sees reality as a great unfolding, from the one into mind, into soul, into the world. But nothing is ever truly separate. All things, though scattered, still whisper of their origin. Like rivers, we flow from the same place and perhaps return to it. This is not a dogma, but a vision, a way of seeing the world as radiant, as meaningful, even in its mystery. Plotinus taught that the soul longs to reunite with its source, not by fleeing the world, but by moving through it with attention and reverence, by contemplating beauty, by seeking simplicity, by turning inward toward that quiet light at the center of being. In this view, truth is not something we build, but something we uncover, something we remember, like a dream half-lived. Tonight, Neoplatonism invites you to rest in that remembering. Flicker of a candle, the curve of a thought, the silence between breaths. These are not accidents. They are reflections of something deeper, something whole. Let your mind drift upstream, back toward the source, back toward the one. Taoism. Taoism invites us to consider that life is not a problem to be solved, but a current to be followed. It teaches of the Tao, the way, a path that cannot be named, cannot be owned, cannot be mapped, and yet flows through all things. The Tao is the rhythm of the river, the curve of the moon, the stillness in your breath. It is what is when you stop trying to force what should be. Laozi, the old master, wrote in the Tao Te Ching, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. And so Taoism teaches by paradox, by poetry, by pointing beyond words. It is the art of wu wei, effortless action. Not inaction, but harmony, doing without striving, living without clinging, being like water, soft yet strong, flowing around obstacles, never needing to resist. Taoism doesn't push you to change the world. It invites you to attune to it, to let go of control, to live with lightness, to trust in unfolding. Tonight, as you lie still, notice how the Tao is already present in the quiet ticking of time. In the exhale you do not force. In the moonlight that needs no permission. You are not separate from the world. You are its expression, its movement, its softness. Let go and let the way carry you like a leaf on water into the silence of the night. Confucianism. Confucianism invites us to consider that wisdom is not only found in solitude or stillness, but in how we live together, how we treat each other, how we honor the threads that bind us. Rooted in the teachings of Confucius, the great Chinese philosopher of the 6th century BCE, Confucianism is a philosophy of relationship, of harmony, of care. It says, you are not just an individual. You are a child, a sibling, a neighbor, a citizen, a friend. Each role carries a responsibility, a rhythm, and when these relationships are guided by respect, kindness, and sincerity, society becomes music, not noise. At the heart of Confucianism is Ren, humaneness, a deep empathy that sees others not as means, but as mirrors. To be humane is not to be perfect, but to try always to be better, to ask, how can I live in a way that uplifts others and brings balance to the whole? Confucius did not speak of gods. He spoke of rituals, of family, of education, of the small daily acts that shape our lives and our character. Even now, as you lie in the quiet, his teaching speaks softly. Greatness is not far away. It is in how you greet others, how you forgive, how you listen. Confucianism is a call to grounded goodness, to noble action, not as a show, but as a habit of the heart. So rest tonight in that simple truth. You matter, and how you live matters too. Zen Buddhism. Zen invites us to consider that the deepest truths cannot be spoken, only lived. It is not a philosophy in the usual sense. There are no long arguments, no elaborate systems. Zen is the sound of a bell, the warmth of tea, the breath that rises and falls without needing to be named. Rooted in Buddhism and shaped in the mountains and monasteries of China and Japan, Zen is a path of simplicity, silence, and sudden insight. It teaches, enlightenment is not far away. It is right here, in this very moment, the way the wind moves through leaves, in the sensation of your body resting in bed, in the pause between one thought and the next. Zen masters often speak in riddles called koans. Two hands clap and there is a sound. What is the sound of one hand? The goal is not to answer, but to wake up, to stop clinging to thought and begin experiencing life as it is. Zen says, do not chase after truth. Just let go of your opinions. The truth will find you in the quiet. Tonight, you do not need to figure anything out. You do not need to improve, achieve, or understand. You only need to breathe and allow this moment to be enough. Zen is not about escape, it is about arrival, and you are already here. Vedanta invites us to consider that the self we know, the one we name, fear, and protect, is not our final self. It whispers, you are not merely this body, not merely this thought, not even this mind. You are Brahman, the infinite, the unchanging, the eternal presence that underlies all things. Born from the Upanishads, the ancient philosophical heart of India, Vedanta is a path of inner realization. It teaches that the deepest truth is not found in the outer world, but in turning inward, in listening. Vedanta speaks of Atman, the true self. It is not ego, it is not your history. It is the silent awareness behind the eyes, the still witness of every experience. It says, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. You are not separate from the divine. You are the divine, briefly appearing as a person. The world, with all its joys and suffering, is not an illusion in the sense of being fake. It is Maya, a veil, a play. It moves and shifts, but underneath it all is something still, and you are that stillness. So rest now. Let go of effort, let go of the dream of becoming, and return to simply being. You are not broken, you are not lost. You are already whole, already home. Vedanta does not offer escape. It offers awakening. not to a new world, but to the truth of this one, Theravada Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism invites us to consider that peace is not something we find, but something we practice. Known as the teaching of the elders, Theravada is the oldest surviving school of Buddhism. It brings us back to the core teachings of the Buddha, not as abstract philosophy, but as a lived path. It begins with a simple truth. Life involves suffering, not as punishment, not because we are wrong, but because we cling to pleasure, to permanence, to identity when a world that is always changing. Theravada offers a response. The Noble Eightfold Path, a way of walking with mindfulness, intention, and compassion. Right view, right speech, right action, right effort, right mindfulness, and more. Not rules to obey, but tools to free ourselves. It teaches that everything arises and passes away. Thoughts, sensations, emotions, even the self. All are impermanent, and knowing this deeply is the beginning of wisdom. Meditation is central in this tradition, not as escape, but as observation. Watching the breath, watching the mind, letting things be and letting them go. Tonight you can join that quiet tradition just by being still, just by noticing the sound of your breath, the space between thoughts, the rising and passing of each moment. Theravada tells us freedom is not in becoming someone else. Freedom is in no longer clinging to who you think you are. Christian philosophy. Christian philosophy invites us to consider that love, not knowledge, not power, is the foundation of all things. It is a tradition, not just a belief, but of deep reflection, of thinkers like Augustine, Aquinas, Kierkegaard, who sought to understand what it means to be human in light of the divine. At its heart is the idea that we are made in the image of God, that our longing for truth, goodness, and beauty is not random, but a reflection of something eternal. Christian philosophy did not claim we are perfect, far from it. It begins with humility, with the recognition that we are limited, fragile, often lost, and yet still loved. It asks, what does it mean to be forgiven? What does it mean to live by grace, not by merit? Augustine spoke of a restless heart, one that finds no peace until it rests in something greater. And Aquinas tried to unite reason and faith, showing that belief does not mean abandoning the mind. Then came Kierkegaard, who said faith is not certainty, but a leap into trust, into mystery, into love. Tonight, Christian philosophy offers no proof, no formula, only a space to wonder and to rest in the idea that you are not alone, that your life has meaning, not because of what you achieve, but because of the one who holds you, even in silence. So breathe, and let love be enough. Islamic philosophy. Islamic philosophy invites us to consider that reason and revelation are not enemies, but companions on the path to truth. It is a tradition rooted in the Quran, yet enriched by centuries of dialogue with Greek thought, Indian logic, and the inner mysticism of the Sufi path. At its center is Tawheed, the oneness of God, not just as a belief, but as a vision of reality. Everything is connected. Everything reflects the divine. Everything returns to the source. Thinkers like Al-Farabi, Avicenna, and Averroes asked, can we think our way to God? Can we understand the universe and still remain humble before its creator? They taught that faith is not blind, that the intellect is a gift, and to use it is an act of worship. And then came Rumi and Al-Ghazali, voices of the heart. They reminded us that knowing God is not only a matter of books, but of love of longing, of surrender. Islamic philosophy is a tapestry woven with reason, poetry, law, and inner silence. It says, search, question, but never forget that beneath every question is a soul that seeks the real. Tonight you don't need to solve the cosmos. You need only remember you are a breath within the breath. You are carried, you are seen, and every step, even this quiet one, is part of the journey back to the one. Jewish philosophy. Jewish philosophy invites us to consider that wrestling with truth is not a sign of weakness, but of faith. It is a tradition shaped not in abstract theories, but in the lived tension between exile and home, law and love, questioning and devotion. It begins with the idea that God is not distant, but present in the unfolding story of a people, of a world, of a heart that seeks. Thinkers like Philo, Maimonides, Martin Buber, and Emmanuel Levinas all asked in different ways, how do we live justly in an imperfect world? How do we know the infinite with finite minds? How do we remain human in the face of suffering? Maimonides spoke of negative theology, that God is beyond what we can say, beyond images, beyond certainty. We cannot define the divine, but we can draw near through ethics, through law, through reverent humility. Later, Buber offered a vision of relationship. He said the sacred is not only in the heavens, but in the us and thou, in the meeting between souls, in the space where we do not objectify, but encounter. Levinas, after the horrors of the 20th century, turned philosophy toward the face of the other. He said, ethics is first. Philosophy. That responsibility comes before understanding. Jewish philosophy is not about easy answers. It is a long, faithful conversation with God, with self, with community, even when the answers don't come. So tonight, let yourself ask. Let yourself not know. And let that not be failure, but devotion. You are part of a story that values the questions as much as the answer. Sufism invites us to consider that the divine is not distant, but closer than breath. It is not found only in scripture or ritual, but in love, in longing, in the soft ache of the heart that seeks. Born within Islam, but flowing beyond boundaries, Sufism is the mystical path, the inward path. It says, you are not separate from God. You are the veil, and you are the doorway. The great Sufi poet Rumi wrote, what you seek is seeking you. And so the seeker becomes the sought, the lover becomes the beloved, and the journey home becomes a dance. Sufism speaks not in logic, but in metaphor, in music, in whirling, in fire. It is less concerned with certainty and more with experience, direct, wordless, and overflowing. It teaches Fana, the dissolving of the self, not to erase you, but to clear the mirror, to let divine light shine through, unblocked by ego or fear. The Sufi path is not easy. It asks everything, but what it gives is beyond words. Tonight, let your thoughts be the desert, let your breath be the caravan, and let your heart be the drum that remembers the rhythm of the one. You do not need to understand the mystery, you only need to open to it. Sufism is not about arrival, it is about intimacy with the journey, with the friend, with the fire that purifies and heals. Gnosticism. Gnosticism invites us to consider that hidden beneath the surface of reality is a deeper truth, one not taught but remembered, one not accepted but known in the soul. From the Greek word gnosis, meaning knowledge, Gnosticism is a mystical vision, not of facts, but of awakening. It whispers, this world is not your true home. You are spirit dressed in matter. You have forgotten, and your task is to remember. Gnostic texts like the Gospel of Thomas speak in riddles and paradoxes. They describe a flawed world, a world of illusion and forgetfulness, ruled by powers that blind rather than guide. But within each of us is a divine spark, a shard of light, a memory of the eternal. To the Gnostic, salvation is not obedience, it is awakening. Not belief, but inner recognition, and this awakening often begins in solitude, in reflection. In the moment you feel that life is deeper than it appears, that something in you does not quite fit this world because it comes from another, tonight let that mystery rest gently with you. You do not need to name it. You do not need to chase it. You only need to listen to the still voice within, to the quiet rebellion against shallow living, to the spark that refuses to dim. Gnosticism reminds us you are not lost, you are remembering, and every breath is a step back to the truth you already carry. Rationalism invites us to consider that truth does not always come from the senses, but from the mind itself. It begins with a simple belief that reason, clear, disciplined thought can uncover the nature of reality, that the universe is not chaos, but a structure we can understand. Philosophers like René Descartes, Baruch Spinoza, and Gottfried Leibniz each trusted in the power of logic, in principles that hold, even when the world feels uncertain. Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am." In a moment of doubt, he found a foundation, the thinking self. Spinoza saw all things as expressions of a single substance, God or nature, bound by rational laws. And Leibniz imagined a world made of tiny, indivisible minds, monads, ordered by a pre-established harmony. To the rationalist, knowledge is not built on shifting sands. It is constructed with care from axioms, clarity, deduction. Tonight, you are not asked to solve equations or seek absolute proof, only to reflect on the quiet power of thought, the way a single clear idea can bring calm, the way a reasoned insight can light the path forward. Rationalism is not cold, it is steady, a lantern in the fog. Let your mind breathe now, not in noise, but in clarity, not in answers, but in order, and in the stillness of your thoughts, know, to think is to exist, and to think clearly is to begin to see. Empiricism. Empiricism invites us to consider that all knowledge begins with experience, that we come into this world not with answers, but with open senses. And it is through those senses, through seeing, hearing, touching, that we come to know anything at all. Thinkers like John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume shaped this. Tradition, they looked out into the world and said, let us not assume, let us observe, let us not invent, let us investigate. John Locke described the mind as a blank slate, a tabula rasa, written upon by life itself. For him, all ideas arise from reflection on our sensations. Berkeley took it further, suggesting that to exist is to be perceived, esse est percipi. And Hume showed us the limits. He questioned causality itself, asking, do we ever truly see cause or only sequence? Empiricism does not promise certainty, but it offers humility, a willingness to learn from the world rather than impose upon it. Tonight, as you lie still, notice how experience continues, even in silence. The feel of your breath, the weight of your body, the distant sounds of night. This is your data. This is your connection to reality. Empiricism reminds us that truth does not always arrive as thunder. Sometimes it arrives as dew, as sensation, as quiet noticing. You do not need to prove anything now, only to observe, to let experience unfold, and in that unfolding a kind of wisdom waits, structuralism. Structuralism invites us to consider that beneath every thought, every story, every culture, there are hidden patterns, that our ideas do not float freely, but emerge from deep structures shared by all humans. It is a lens, not just to see the world, but to see how we see the world. Born from linguistics and shaped by thinkers like Ferdinand de Saussure, Claude Lévi-Strauss, and Roland Barthes, structuralism teaches that meaning is not isolated. It lives in relationships, in oppositions, in systems. A word means something not by itself, but by how it differs from other words. Hot only makes sense because we know cold. Father, because we know son. Claude Lévi-Strauss applied this to myths, discovering that the stories of different cultures, though unique in surface, often share deep structural similarities, a kind of universal grammar of the human soul. Barthes looked at modern life, fashion, advertisements, food, and saw symbols everywhere. Nothing is just what it is. Everything is part of a code. Structuralism asks us to step back, to see the scaffolding behind the surface, to recognize that even our most personal thoughts are shaped by shared systems. Tonight, you can let that awareness soften you, your ideas, your dreams, even your identity. They're not just yours. They're echoes of patterns older than you, and in knowing that, there's a strange comfort. You are not alone in your thinking. You are part of something woven, something vast. Let the structure hold you like a net beneath the tightrope, and rest. Post-structuralism invites us to consider that the structures we rely on might not be as stable as they seem, that meaning is not fixed, truth is not a destination, and identity is not a single note, but a shifting harmony, full of contradiction and change. Emerging as a response to structuralism, post-structuralist thinkers like Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault, and Julia Kristeva ask difficult questions. If language gives us meaning, what happens when language fails? If systems shape us, can we ever step outside of them? Derrida introduced deconstruction, a method, but also a mindset. He showed how every text, every idea contains tensions, gaps, paradoxes, signs that meaning is never pure or final. Foucault examined knowledge itself, tracing how truth is shaped by power, how even reason can be used to control. Post-structuralism doesn't offer a new system. It loosens our grip on systems, not to destroy, but to free, to make space for complexity, for voices that don't fit the mold. It says, let go of the dream of certainty. Let truth be a dialogue, not a verdict. Tonight, in this quiet space that can feel like peace, you are not a puzzle to be solved. You are a poem, open to interpretation, layered, evolving. Let your meaning shift. Let your thoughts unfold. Let yourself breathe, undefined. Post-structuralism reminds us the story isn't finished, and that's exactly what makes it beautiful. Postmodernism invites us to consider that the grand narratives, the sweeping stories that once guided us, may no longer hold. It is not the enemy of truth, but the questioner of whose truth and how it came to be believed. Where modernism searched for certainty, clarity, and universal meaning, postmodernism turns gently away and toward ambiguity, plurality, and play. Thinkers like Jean-François Lyotard, Jean Baudrillard, and Frederick Jameson explored a world overflowing with symbols, where meaning is copied, remixed, repackaged until it blurs. Lyotard spoke of the incredulity toward meta-narratives, the the skepticism toward any single story that claims to explain everything. Baudrillard described a world of simulacra, images without originals, signs that no longer point to anything real. Reality becomes a performance, a simulation. Postmodernism does not demand answers. It opens space for different perspectives. It honors irony, contradiction, resistance. It tells us you are not obligated to make everything cohere. You are allowed to sit in the in-between, to feel unsure, to float. And tonight, in this quiet space, that can feel like freedom. You don't need to solve life like a puzzle. You don't need to fit into someone else's narrative. Let yourself be fragmented. Let yourself be layered. Let yourself be enough, even in mystery. Postmodernism reminds us that unfinished stories are still worth reading. Utilitarianism. Utilitarianism invites us to consider a simple, powerful question. What brings the most good to the most people? It is a philosophy of consequences, of weighing actions by their impact, not by tradition, not by intention, but by outcome. At its heart is the belief that happiness matters, that suffering matters, and that morality is about reducing one and increasing the other wherever we can. Thinkers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill shaped this tradition. Bentham imagined a world measured by pleasure and pain, a moral calculus to guide our choices. Mill refined it, emphasizing not just quantity of happiness, but quality. He asked, what kinds of happiness elevate us? What forms of joy deepen the soul? Utilitarianism can seem cold, all numbers and logic, but at its core is compassion, a desire to care, to protect, to lift as many as possible with the life we are given. Tonight it offers you a gentle reflection. Where does your kindness go? What effect does your presence have? You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to save the world. But in each small choice, a word, a gesture, a moment of listening, you shape the world around you. Utilitarianism reminds us ethics isn't abstract. It's every day. And goodness, when shared, grows quietly in the lives we touch. Deontology. Deontology invites us to consider that morality is not just about outcomes, but about principles, about doing what is right because it is right. It asks, would this action still be good even if it led to no reward, even if no one saw? The word comes from the Greek deon, meaning duty, okay? And the duty is to respect others, not as tools, not as means, but as ends in themselves. Immanuel Kant, the great voice of deontology, gave us the categorical imperative. Act only according to that maxim by which you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. In other words, what if everyone did what you're about to do? Would the world be better or worse? Kant believed that morality flows not from emotion or utility, but from reason, from the dignity of the human person, from a commitment to justice, even when it's hard. Deontology is not always easy. It doesn't bend to convenience. It asks you to stand firm, even when no one's watching. Tonight, let that be a quiet guide, not as pressure, but as peace. You do not need to be perfect, but you can be principled. In each moment, there is a choice, and in choosing with care, with conscience, with clarity, you honor the depth of your humanity. Deontology reminds us, doing good is not about what you get, it's about who you become. Virtue ethics. Virtue ethics invites us to consider not just what we should do, but who we should become. It asks, what does it mean to live well? What kind of person flourishes, not just in moments, but over a lifetime? Rooted in ancient Greek philosophy, especially in the work of Aristotle, Virtue ethics shifts the focus from rules and results to character, to habits, to the kind of soul you cultivate through practice, patience, and reflection. Aristotle taught that the good life, the eudaimonia, is not found in pleasure or wealth, but in living a life of purpose, excellence, and balance. He spoke of the golden mean, the virtue that lies between two extremes. Courage, for example, is neither rashness nor cowardice. Generosity is neither wastefulness nor greed. Virtue is not perfection, it's a direction, a slow, steady turning of the self toward wisdom, kindness, and integrity. Tonight you are not asked to judge yourself, only to reflect. What virtues are growing in you? What kind of person are you becoming? Perhaps today you practiced patience. Perhaps you listened more deeply. Perhaps you stumbled and chose to begin again. These are the quiet steps of a virtuous life. Virtue ethics reminds us the good life is not something you find, it is something you build, one choice, one breath, one quiet moment at a time. Anarchism invites us to consider that authority simply by existing is not always justified, that obedience is not always virtue, and that freedom, real freedom, begins with self-responsibility and mutual care. It's often misunderstood as chaos, as disorder. But at its heart, anarchism is a vision of a world without domination, without hierarchy imposed by force, a world built on cooperation, not coercion. Thinkers like Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, Emma Goldman, and Mikhail Bakunin imagined societies where power is shared, not hoarded, where people relate not as rulers and ruled, but as equals, not in lawless abandon, but in voluntary harmony. Anarchism asks, what would community look like if it were chosen freely? What kind of order could emerge from trust instead of control? It values direct action, mutual aid, and local autonomy, not utopia, but possibility. Tonight, let that idea rest with you, not as rebellion, but as renewal. What would it feel like to move through the world without fear of domination? What would it mean to be governed not by force, but by conscience? In your own life, where can you invite more freedom and more responsibility? Anarchism reminds us, real peace is not maintained by power, it is nurtured by trust. And you too are capable of living gently and freely. Marxism invites us to consider that the structure of society, its classes, its labor, its wealth, shapes how we live, how we think, even how we dream. It is not merely an economic theory, it is a way of seeing the world through the lens of struggle, of conflict between those who own and those who labor. Karl Marx saw history not as a series of ideas, but as a series of material conditions. He wrote of alienation, the sense that in modern life, we are disconnected from our work, from each other, and from ourselves. Marx believed that capitalism, while powerful and productive, also creates deep inequalities, that it turns people into commodities, that it hides the true cost of profit in human lives. But Marxism is not just critique, it is also hope, a belief that a more just society is possible, one where the means of production are shared, where work is dignified, where freedom is real. Tonight, you need not take up slogans or manifestos, just reflect gently who benefits from the world as it is, who is unseen, unheard, undervalued, and where, even in your own life, might small acts of solidarity grow. Marxism reminds us, a different world is not only imaginable, it begins in how we see and how we care. Let your rest be revolutionary in its softness. Let your dreams be shared, not owned. Idealism. Idealism invites us to consider that reality, the world we see, hear, and touch, might not exist apart from the mind. It asks, what if the world is not something we find, but something we form? What if consciousness is not a product of the universe, but its source? This is not fantasy. It is a deep philosophical position held by thinkers like George Berkeley, Immanuel Kant, and Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Berkeley famously said, "To be is to be perceived." He believed that nothing exists unless it is held in awareness, either ours or God's. Kant, more cautiously, proposed that we never know the world as it is, only as it appears through the filters of our perception, space, time, causality. The noumenal world, the thing in itself, remains forever beyond our grasp. And Hegel imagined a cosmic unfolding of spirit, Geist, becoming conscious of itself through history, art, and thought. Idealism is not naive. It is not blind to suffering. It simply shifts the frame from matter to mind, from object to awareness. Tonight, let this idea cradle you, that the world may arise with your attention, that reality, in some quiet way, includes you, not as a passive observer, but as a co-creator. Idealism reminds us you are not trapped in the world. You are part of its unfolding, and in your stillness it continues to bloom. Realism. Realism invites us to consider that reality exists, independent of our thoughts, our beliefs, or our wishes. That the world is not made by the mind, but met by it. The truth is not shaped by perception, but discovered through it. Where idealism turns inward, realism looks outward. It says, there is a world, and it is what it is, whether or not we understand it. This does not make the world cold or lifeless. It simply reminds us the mountains do not rise or fall based on how we feel. The stars do not flicker because we believe in them. Reality has a structure, and our task is to listen closely. Philosophers like Aristotle and later Thomas Aquinas, Thomas Reid, and many modern scientists place their trust in the existence of an external world, a world that reason and observation could help us slowly come to know, imperfectly but honestly. Realism honors evidence. It trusts in dialogue. It builds slowly, brick by brick, on what can be seen, tested, and shared. Tonight, realism offers a kind of rest. You don't need to invent meaning. You don't need to bend the world to fit your mind. Let it be what it is. The cool night air, the shape of your breath, the quiet hum of existence, indifferent and beautiful. Realism reminds us there is something steady beneath the swirl of thought, something real, and even now you are resting in it. Materialism invites us to consider that everything, thoughts, dreams, memories, love, arises from matter, that the stars above and the quiet mind within are made of the same fundamental stuff. From the ancient atomists like Democritus and Lucretius to modern scientific thinkers and physicalists, materialism holds that there is no need to search for ghosts behind the machine. The machine itself, complex, evolving, interconnected, is miracle enough. The brain is not a vessel for the soul. It is the soul in physical form, or rather, what we call soul is the expression of neurons, chemistry, biology, a dance of the material world. Materialism says there is no separate realm, no hidden spark beyond the body. Instead, the sacred is here, in the blood, in the breath, in the bone. This view is not meant to flatten wonder, to relocate it. Think the thought you are thinking now, was born of atoms. The feeling in your chest is a wave in the sea of your body. Tonight, materialism invites you to rest in this simplicity. You are made of matter, but you are not just matter. You are matter that feels, matter that dreams, matter aware of its own impermanence and still moved to love. Let go of the need to transcend. Sink into what is, into the warm, breathing earth of your own body. Materialism reminds us, you do not need more than this moment. You already are the mystery. Dualism. Dualism invites us to consider that reality is made of two distinct substances, mind and matter, body and soul, thought and extension. It is the view that you are not just a body and not only a mind, but a union, mysterious, delicate, between the two. Most famously expressed by René Descartes, dualism declares, I think, therefore I am. He believed that while the body may decay, the mind, the thinking self, is something separate, perhaps immortal. In this view, the body occupies space, obeys laws, and hungers. The mind reflects, reasons, and dreams. They touch, but do not merge. Dualism leaves space for the sacred, the spiritual, the unseen. It makes room for free will, for the sense that consciousness is not simply a mechanical product, but something higher, a light in the machine. And yet, it also acknowledges tension, how the body limits the mind, how the mind can wound the body. Tonight, as you lie still, dualism invites you to honor both. The ache of your muscles, the breath in your chest, and the thoughts that drift like clouds behind your eyes. You are not trapped in your body. You are not above it. You are a meeting point, a bridge between two worlds. Let that bridge rest now. Let the body soften. Let the mind float. Dualism reminds us, you are more than what you feel, and yet feeling is part of what makes you real. Monism invites us to consider that behind all the differences, all the dualities and divisions, there is only one reality, one substance, one source, one truth, flowing in many forms. Whether it is called nature, mind, God, or the One, monism says all is one, not in appearance, but in essence. This idea has appeared across centuries and cultures, in Spinoza's God or Nature, in Plotinus's Emanations from the One, in the Advaita Vedanta tradition of India, which declares Tattvam Asi, you are that. Monism asks us to see past surface separations between you and me, between body and spirit, between subject and object. All things, it suggests, are expressions of a single, infinite presence. And though we appear as waves, we are also ocean. Tonight, monism invites you to rest in that unity, to feel the boundary between yourself and the world soften. The breath you take was once a tree's exhale. The thoughts you think ripple from countless lives before you. You are not separate. You are a continuation. Let go of names. Let go of distinctions. Let yourself dissolve gently into the stillness. Monism reminds us, you are not alone. You are not even you in isolation. You are the whole, dreaming itself in your shape in this moment. Logical positivism invites us to consider that meaning must be clear and truth must be testable. That language, when used precisely, becomes a tool not just for poetry, but for knowing. Emerging in the early 20th century, logical. Positivism was shaped by the Vienna Circle, a group of philosophers and scientists, including Moritz Schlick, Rudolf Carnap, and influenced by Ludwig Wittgenstein. They believed that statements are only meaningful if they can be verified through experience, or if they are logically necessary. In other words, the cat is on the mat is meaningful, it can be checked. All bachelors are unmarried is meaningful, and it's logically true. But abstract claims without evidence, they are dismissed as metaphysical, poetic perhaps, but empty. Logical positivism called for clarity in a world clouded by speculation. It trusted science, it trusted precision, it sought a purified language, one that would not deceive or confuse. Tonight, that clarity can be soothing. Let your thoughts quiet. Let the noise of vague worries drift away. What is real? What can be known? What stands, even when feeling fades? You don't need all the answers now, just the space to breathe, to notice what is here, to let truth be simple and kind. Logical positivism reminds us not all that is said has meaning, but even silence can be deeply true. Philosophy of language. Philosophy of language invites us to consider that words are not merely tools, they are bridges. They shape how we think, what we feel, and even who we are. It asks, where does meaning come from? Do words reflect the world or create it? And what lies between the speaker and the listener? From Ludwig Wittgenstein to J.L. Austin, from Noam Chomsky to Saussure. This tradition explores the very fabric of communication. Wittgenstein once wrote, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." He taught us that language is not static. It lives in use. It is a game we play together, governed by shared forms of life. Austin introduced the idea of the speech act, that language doesn't just describe reality, it can do things, to promise, to apologize, to name. Others saw how language shapes power, who gets to speak, and who gets heard. Philosophy of language reminds us that even silence speaks, that a pause can be as powerful as a paragraph, that a single word, spoken with care, can carry a lifetime of meaning. Tonight, listen not just to what is said, but to the spaces between, to the texture of language, to the softness of unspoken understanding. Let your inner voice speak gently. Let your thoughts unfold in words as delicate as breath. And remember, to speak is to offer yourself. To listen is to receive the soul of another. Critical theory. Critical theory invites us to consider that the structures we live within, economic, cultural, political, are not neutral. They shape how we think, what we desire, and who we are allowed to become. Born from the Frankfurt School with thinkers like Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, Herbert Marcuse, and later Jürgen Habermas, critical theory asks not only what is, but who benefits from it. It peels back the surface of modern life, mass media, consumer culture, institutions, to reveal how power hides itself, how ideology seduces, how freedom can be reduced to choice between illusions. Adorno warned of the culture industry, entertainment designed not to uplift, but to pacify. Marcuse spoke of repressive tolerance, a society that permits dissent only to render it harmless. And Habermas imagined a better path through dialogue, transparency, and mutual understanding. Critical theory is not cynicism, it is care, deep care for human dignity, for justice, for liberation. It seeks not to destroy, but to awaken. Tonight, let this reflection settle in quietly. What in your world feels natural, but may be inherited? What assumptions go unquestioned? You are not asked to rage, only to notice, only to listen for the quiet voices underneath the noise, only to wonder what might change if we imagine things differently. Critical theory reminds us the world is made, and it can be remade, and it starts with seeing clearly, even in the dark. Feminist philosophy. Feminist philosophy invites us to consider that knowledge, justice, and even truth are not separate from gender, that our ideas, like our institutions, have histories, and many of those histories have been written without women's voices. This tradition is not just about equality, though it includes that. It is about asking deeper questions. Whose experience is centered? Whose pain is ignored? What kinds of wisdom have been dismissed as emotion or silence or care? From early thinkers like Mary Wollstonecraft to Simone de Beauvoir, from bell hooks to Judith Butler, feminist philosophers challenge assumptions. They ask us to reflect on power, not just in laws, but in language, culture, and thought itself. Beauvoir wrote, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." With this, she shattered the illusion of gender as destiny, revealing it as construction. Butler would later take this further, showing that gender is performance, a role we act and repeat. Feminist thought is not one thing, it is plural. It includes black feminism, queer theory, ecofeminism, intersectionality. It grows through dialogue, not dogma. Tonight, let feminist philosophy offer you gentleness, not as softness, but as strength, the kind of strength that listens, that nurtures, that protects not just the loudest voices, but the most vulnerable. You do not need to be certain. You do not need to fit a mold. Feminist thought makes space for all that has been pushed aside and still lives. It reminds us justice is not abstract. It is relational, and care is a kind of truth, environmental ethics. Environmental ethics invites us to consider that morality extends beyond the human, that the trees, the rivers, the soil beneath our feet are not just resources, but relationships. It challenges the old idea that nature exists for us. It whispers instead, "You are not above the earth, you are of it." Philosophers like Aldo Leopold, Arne Naess, and Val Plumwood invite us to see nature not as a backdrop, but as community. Leopold called for a land ethic where wolves and willows, soil and songbirds all belong to a moral circle. Naess introduced deep ecology, urging us to move beyond shallow fixes, to ask who we are in relation to the whole. Plumwood warned of hyperseparation, the illusion that humans are masters rather than participants. Environmental ethics is not about guilt. It is about kinship. It is about remembering the breath we take was once a tree's gift, that our well-being is rooted literally in the life around us. Tonight, let that thought ground you. Feel the earth below your bed. Imagine the quiet pulse of soil, the slow breath of forest, the rhythm of rain far away. You are not separate. You are not a visitor. You are the earth thinking. Environmental ethics reminds us to care for the world is not an obligation. It is a return to what we've always been. African philosophy. African philosophy invites us to consider that wisdom is not only found in texts, but in stories, proverbs, rhythm, and community. It asks us to remember that philosophy is not confined to Europe or the academy. It lives in every culture that has pondered the meaning of life, death, duty, and joy. At its heart, African philosophy is deeply relational. It is grounded in Ubuntu, a Zulu concept meaning I am because we are. To be human in this view is not to think alone, but to live in connection, to know yourself through others, to honor your ancestors, your community, your land. Thinkers like Kwame Gyekye, Molefi Asante, and Sophie Oluwole explore African traditions, both ancient and modern, wrestling with ethics, metaphysics, and politics through uniquely African lenses. This is not a single philosophy. It is many, diverse, local, oral, woven through languages and lifeways. It values wisdom over cleverness, harmony over dominance, and storytelling not as entertainment but as a form of truth. Tonight, let your breath be a story passed down. Let your heartbeat be a drum echoing through time. Let yourself feel the unseen circle of those who came before holding you. You are not alone. You are part of a lineage, a rhythm that stretches back to the first fire, the first question, the first name whispered into the wind. African philosophy reminds us the self is not a closed door, it is a doorway, and through that doorway we meet the world. Native American traditions, Native American philosophy invites us to consider that wisdom is found not only in thought, but in silence, not only in answers, but in listening. It is a tradition that spans hundreds of nations and lifeways, from the Haudenosaunee to the Lakota, the Navajo to the Cherokee, and many more, each with its own language, cosmology, and path of knowing. But among them, a common thread: respect for the land, reverence for the ancestors, responsibility to all our relations, human and more than human. This philosophy sees the world as alive, not metaphorically, literally. The rocks have memory. The rivers speak. The wind is not a force, but a friend. Elders teach through story, not argument, through lived example, not abstraction. Time is circular. Balance matters more than victory. Tonight, let yourself slow to that rhythm. Let the world feel round again. Not rushed, not linear, not owned. Imagine your breath as smoke from a sacred fire, your body as part of the soil, your dreams as messages carried by an owl across the dark sky. Native traditions remind us the earth is not a place we walk upon. It is a relative, and in honoring it, we remember who we are. Aboriginal Dreamtime, Aboriginal philosophy, especially as expressed through the concept of dreamtime, invites us to consider that time is not a straight line, but a sacred cycle, that creation did not happen once, long ago. It is happening still, right now, in you. The peoples of Australia, including the Yolngu, Anangu, Noongar, and many others, hold rich and diverse traditions passed down for tens of thousands of years. Their philosophies are not found in books, but in songlines, stories, ceremonies, and land itself. Dreamtime is not a dream as we know it. It is a dimension, a sacred reality that underlies this one. It is the realm where ancestral beings shaped the land, gave birth to language, and set the laws of life. These beings are not dead. They are alive in rivers, stars, and silence. To walk through the land is to walk through meaning. Every stone, every tree, every curve of desert holds a story, and each person is responsible for remembering, honoring, and passing that story on. Tonight, let that timelessness soothe you. You are not lost in time. You are folded into it, connected to ancestors who walked before maps, who sang the world into form. Your breath is ancient, your stillness sacred. You belong here. Aboriginal philosophy reminds us the earth does not need to be explained. It needs to be heard, and in the quiet of dreamtime, we begin to listen. Latin American philosophy. Latin American philosophy invites us to consider a world shaped by struggle, resilience, memory, and hope. It is a tradition born from many roots: indigenous wisdom, colonial trauma, African heritage, European thought, and revolutionary spirit, all woven together into something fiercely unique. It's not only academic, it is lived. It is philosophy with dust on its boots, protest in its voice, and poetry in its heart. Thinkers like José Martí, Leopoldo Zea, Enrique Dussel, and Gloria Anzaldúa. What does it mean to think from the margins? What does liberation feel like from the inside? How do we decolonize not just lands, but minds? This is a philosophy of the mestizo, the blended, the in-between. It values plurality, hybridity, contradiction. It tells us you can be more than one thing. You do not need to choose. It speaks of coloniality, how systems of power survive even after formal empires fall. And it dreams of liberation, not just politically, but spiritually. Tonight, as you rest, let that dream hold you. Let your heart stretch across continents. Let your soul whisper in more than one language. You are not only what the world made you, you are what you reclaim, what you reimagine, what you become. Latin American philosophy reminds us thought is not confined to the library. It rises from the streets. It sings in exile. It lives in you. Caribbean philosophy invites us to consider what it means to be shaped by the sea, by tides of migration, slavery, survival, and resistance. It speaks in many tongues. It is African, indigenous, European, and creolized, a conversation of fractured identities and fierce creativity. Thinkers like Edouard Glissant, Frantz Fanon, and Sylvia Wynter explored the deep wounds of colonialism, the complexities of race, and the beauty of cultural hybridity. Fanon, a Martinican psychiatrist and revolutionary, wrote of the colonized mind, how oppression reaches inside us, shaping even our self-image. He called for radical healing, not only politically, but psychologically. To remake the world, we must also remake ourselves. Glissant gave us the idea of relation, a poetic vision of identity that is not fixed, but relational. Not a root, but a rhizome, branching, connecting, constantly growing. And Wynter asks, what if we redefine the human itself, not as a Western idea, but as a plural story? Caribbean philosophy is a philosophy of rupture, but also rhythm, of pain, but also music. It lives in the silence of forgotten islands and the laughter of crowded streets. Tonight, let the waves wash through you. Let the broken pieces float and reform. Let your identity be a shoreline, shaped by storms, softened by time. You do not have to be one thing. You do not have to be whole. Caribbean philosophy reminds us you are not a puzzle to be solved. You are a song still being written. Philosophy of mind. Philosophy of mind invites us to consider the deepest question of all. What is consciousness? What is the mind, this flickering, thinking flame we call me? It asks, is the mind just the brain, a pattern of neurons, a chemical reaction, or is it something more, something mysterious, immaterial, aware of itself? This field explores puzzles like the mind-body problem. How does the physical brain give rise to thoughts, emotions, and awareness? The hard problem of consciousness. Why does experience feel like anything at all? And the problem of other minds. How do we know anyone else is conscious? Philosophers like René Descartes, David Chalmers, Gilbert Ryle, and Patricia Churchland offer different visions. Some see mind as separate from body. Others say it is an illusion, a trick of biology. Still others suggest that mind and matter are two aspects of one thing, or that consciousness might even be a fundamental property of the universe. But tonight, you don't need to solve it. You only need to notice. You are aware. You can hear these words. You can feel your breath. You are not asleep, not yet, but also not fully awake. You are drifting gently through layers of thought. What is this space? Who is the one listening? Philosophy of mind reminds us you are both the question and the witness, and even in stillness your mind unfolds like the night sky, vast, quiet, infinite. Determinism and free will. Determinism and free will invite us to consider the flow of time and whether we truly steer it. They ask, are your choices your own, or are they echoes of causes you cannot see? Your biology, your past, the stars, the structure of the universe. Determinism holds that everything, every thought, every breath, every motion unfolds from what came before, like dominoes falling, like a river tracing its inevitable course. In this view, even your deepest decisions were shaped by things outside your control. And yet, we feel free. We feel like agents, choosing, creating, willing. This is the paradox. Some thinkers, like Spinoza and Laplace, embraced determinism. Others, like Sartre, insisted on radical freedom, that even in constraint we choose. And then there are the compatibilists, like Daniel Dennett, who suggest maybe freedom and causality are not enemies. Maybe freedom means acting from who you are, even if you were shaped. Tonight, feel the weight lift. You don't need to have all the answers, just notice. The breath, automatic yet chosen. The thought, spontaneous yet yours. The stillness, given and received. Determinism reminds you, you are part of the universe. Free will reminds you, and yet the universe becomes different through you. Both may be true, both may be beautiful. Panpsychism. Panpsychism invites us to consider something radical and deeply calming. That consciousness, or at least experience, is not rare. It is not confined to humans or animals or brains. It may be woven into the fabric of the universe itself. In this view, everything from a stone to a star has a spark of awareness. Not thought, not memory, but a sliver of what it is like to be. Panpsychism is not new. It echoes ancient animist traditions and appears in the works of Leibniz, Spinoza, and more recently, Gallenstrassen and Philip Goff. They ask, if consciousness appears suddenly in us, where does it come from? Is it more likely that it emerges from dead matter, or that it was there quietly all along? Not full minds in pebbles, but flickers, tiny pulses of experience, nestled in every particle. Tonight, imagine the world this way, that the pillow beneath your head has a kind of stillness it knows, that the moon outside your window dreams slowly through gravity, that you are not alone in your awareness, but swimming in a sea of sentience. Panpsychism is not about ego, it is about reverence. It invites you to soften, to treat the world not as machine, but as kin. And as you drift into sleep, know this. The universe is not just watching, it is feeling, and you are part of its quiet hum. Personal identity theory. Personal identity theory invites us to consider a deeply intimate question. Who are you? Not just your name or your story, but the you that persists through time. Are you your body, your memories, your soul, a pattern, a process? This branch of philosophy explores what makes a person the same person from one moment to the next. John Locke said it was memory, your ability to recall past experiences. David Hume disagreed. He found no permanent self, only a bundle of sensations. Derek Parfit suggested that identity is not what matters. What matters is psychological continuity. The person you were 10 years ago may be as distant from you as a stranger. In Eastern traditions like Buddhism, the self is seen as an illusion, a useful fiction. We cling to it, but it is always changing, always dissolving. Tonight, feel that gently, the you that lies down to rest is not quite the same you that woke up this morning. And yet, there is a thread, not a fixed point, but a motion, not an object, but a rhythm. You are not a thing, you are becoming. Personal identity theory reminds us you are not trapped by your past. You are not finished. You are the story, being written sentence by sentence, breath by breath. And tonight, your story pauses in peace. Simulation theory. Simulation theory invites us to consider a strange and shimmering possibility. What if reality is not real? At least not in the way we think. What if everything you see, the stars, the ground, your own reflection, is part of a vast digital illusion popularized by thinkers like Nick Bostrom and echoed in science fiction? This theory suggests that an advanced civilization might someday have the power to simulate conscious beings like us in worlds indistinguishable from their own. And if that's possible, how would we know we're not already in one? It sounds far-fetched. Yet, philosophers and physicists take it seriously, because if simulations can exist, and if they become common, then statistically, we might already be inside one. But simulation theory isn't just a puzzle, it's a mirror. It asks, does it matter? If this life is simulated, is your love less real? Is your pain less valid? Is your wonder less alive? Tonight, rest not in answers, but in awe. Maybe we're in a simulation. Maybe we're not. But the experience of this moment, the breath in your chest, the stillness in your room, the warmth of thought, is real enough to matter. Simulation theory reminds us reality might be constructed, but meaning is chosen. And even in a dream, you can choose to be kind, to care, to wonder, to live as if it matters, because it does. Thanks for watching. I hope you are asleep by now. If not, have a good night's rest and remember to subscribe. That would make me really happy. See you in the next video.